Welcome to the Graduate Job Podcast, your home for weekly information and inspiration to help you get the graduate job of your dreams.
Welcome to the Graduate Job Podcast with your host, James Curran. The Graduate Job Podcast is your weekly home for all things related to helping you finding that amazing job. Each week I bring together the best minds in the industry, speaking to leading authors, entrepreneurs, coaches and bloggers who bring decades of experience into a bite-sized weekly 30-minute show. Put simply, this is a show which I had when I graduated. So I'm back after a couple of weeks off out in France watching the football at the European Championships. England were abysmal, so the least said about that the better. Roy Hodgson, if you're listening, I'm available for coaching to help you find that next job. But it was nice to have some time off and be in the sunshine and enjoy the south of France, to think about the podcast and where I'm going to take it over the next couple of months. I've got some brilliant guests lined up, so stay tuned. And speaking of brilliant guests, have I got a cracker for you today? I've gone international again in the search for the best careers advice talent, and I'm joined from the States by brilliant blogger Raghav Haran, as we discuss how to land any job you want, even if you're not qualified. In this half hour, Raghav shatters some of the conventional myths about what you need to do to get a job, as we explore what companies really want from their candidates, a more effective option for getting a job than sending hundreds of speculative CVs, and how creating a pre-interview project can be the secret to getting you that dream job. No matter where you are on your job search, this is an episode you won't want to miss. As always, all links to everything we discuss and a full transcript available in the show notes at graduatejobpodcast.com/landanyjob. Before we start, a quick request from me. Your feedback helps me to create the shows that you want to hear. So I've set up a super simple and very quick survey, as I want the show to best serve your needs. It's got 5 questions and it'll take you a minute, so please check it out at graduatejobpodcast.com/survey. I look forward to hearing your thoughts, but in the meantime, let's crack on with the show. I'm very excited today to welcome to the show a man of many talents, entrepreneur, designer, marketeer, and most importantly of all for today, blogger at landanyjobyouwant.com. Welcome to the Graduate Job Podcast, Raghav Haran.
Thanks, James. It's good to be here.
So, Raghav, I gave you the briefest of intros there. Would you like to give yourself a proper introduction and let us know what it is that you do?
Yeah, so as a day job, I work with New York Times bestselling authors and entrepreneurs to sort of fine-tune their market strategy. I also work with a company called Mind Valley right now, and they basically work with big-name authors out there to distill their big ideas and their information from their books into like bite-sized courses and launch them to millions of people. And I also work, as you mentioned, landanyjobyouwant.com is sort of where I pump out my career advice and help people get past the old tired resume blasting and all this career advice crap that you see online and stuff that actually works.
Super. And as Raghav mentioned there, definitely recommend his blog, and it will be linked to in the show notes. So go to graduatejobpodcast.com/landanyjob, and there'll be links and a full transcript for everything that we discussed today, including all the articles that we mentioned. And today we're going to cover one of his articles which went viral, how to get any job you want, even if you're not qualified, in a bit of detail. So Raghav, maybe starting with that one at the beginning, could you talk us through maybe the fundamental mismatch which you describe of what people think employers want, but what recruiters are actually looking for? Could you delve into this for us?
Yeah, so the way that like job seekers traditionally approach these applications is they usually go on these sites like LinkedIn or Monster, Career Builder. They scroll through like a job postings and they find something they like, and they look through the job description. As long as they hit, I guess, most of those things, they send off a resume and they hope to hear back. That's kind of the traditional way that people approach things. What employers actually want is not like the perfect resume. They don't care about the perfect cover letter. They don't care about the perfect application that hits all of those specific requirements that they say that you should have. What they want is for you to basically solve their problems. So if they're hiring a UX designer, they're coming to that application with the mindset of, okay, we need someone to design stuff for us. If they need a marketer, they're coming to it with the mindset of like, we need someone to market things for us. So my basic premise is that if you can like solve that problem, then basically everything else becomes practically relevant.
No, that's a brilliant point. And you talk about how even if they say they want 3 to 5 years experience, this is negotiable, and a lot of people would maybe see that and then just immediately not even bother applying.
Yeah.
Would you say that there's a limit though to how much experience you can circle around by being able to demonstrate that you can do the job?
Well, you have to like actually be able to do it. That's really the only real requirement that I've seen in my experience. So, I mean, someone with, I guess, 10 years of experience obviously would be able to do certain things in that role that someone with like 1 year can't. So I guess there's kind of like a disconnect there. But for example, like if you're coming out of school, if you're like a new grad, graduating from an undergrad or master's program, chances are you can probably do a job at a same level as someone who has maybe 2 or 3 years worth of experience, even if you have like 0. So I think that the essential thing comes down to like, can you actually do it or not? If you can, then you don't need the years.
And you talk in the article about the 4 steps to getting the job. And could you take us through what step 1 is and what that looks like?
Yeah, so instead of shotgunning your resume out to like 50,000 different employers hoping to get like 2 or 3 responses back, what I recommend is focusing on basically 3 to 5 jobs that are hiring right now that you are super, super interested in. So what I personally did, for example, when I was applying for like design gigs, is I focused on like a few specific companies like Quora. I focused on I think Shutterstock and a few other companies. And that's kind of step 1. Instead of shotgunning out your resume to like a billion different people, just focusing on a few and getting that right.
And how would you recommend people begin to focus down? Is it just a question of picking companies that people want to work for or particular industries? How can people take that first step to maybe narrow down to the select 3 to 5?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people have this concern that they need to keep their options open. They don't want to close any doors, and that's completely fine. I mean, this is just for specific, like, I mean, if you want to apply to like 50 companies, that's completely fine. What I'm saying is that you should focus on like 3 at a time, 3 to 5 at a time, just so you can get that application process right. I guess the way that you would narrow it down is, like, the way that I narrow it down is by figuring out which companies that I actually want to work for, whose products I like, whose missions I like, who I feel like I can learn a lot from, and you can kind of get an idea of how the company is like before you work there by actually talking to people who work there. So that's kind of what I do too.
Excellent, which takes us nicely on to step 2, which is outline what you'll be doing on the job. So what ways do you recommend that people can begin to find out exactly what the job entails? Because often you read a job description of what you might be doing, and what you actually do in the flesh is something very, very different. Yeah,
for sure. So let's say you're applying for like a marketing gig. So step 1 would be to identify 3 different jobs that are hiring for your role. So let's say you want to be a marketing manager. So 3 different job titles, 3 different companies that are hiring for a marketing manager gig. And number 2 would be doing something like you can either look at the specific job requirements that are on the page, or you can actually email someone who's working in the job title that you want to work for at that company, and actually ask them a specific list of questions to sort of figure out what you would be doing on that job ahead of time.
That's a brilliant advice, and one that I recommend with our clients, especially with LinkedIn, being able to use the alumni search tool where you can quickly just tap into your alumni network from university, and these people are a semi-warm contact and so open for actually replying to you, and always happy to speak about what it is that they do. Everyone, as you talk in one of your blogs, everyone likes to be the expert and the person who can give you the advice and lead you through what it is they're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the kind of the questions that you can ask them are something like what sort of things would I be doing on the job if I were hired? What sort of projects are you working on like a day-to-day basis? What kind of challenges are you having right now? And kind of like after you talk to them, after just having like a 15-minute conversation, that really sets you up extremely well to be able to prove that you can do the job ahead of time.
Are there any questions which you wouldn't recommend people asking?
Don't ask for a job. Like don't ask them like about the job posting that they have. Don't ask them if they're hiring. Don't ask them if you're a good fit. Don't ask them like anything related to the job at hand. Just ask them. Just kind of evaluate whether it would be a good fit for you. Come with it from that mindset. Like what kind of things are they working on? What sort of projects would you be doing if you were in their shoes? What's the culture like? Basically, just kind of getting a sense of what they are like, and you evaluating them.
And how would you recommend making that initial approach? What sort of things should you be asking for? Is it as simple as just saying, I'm looking for, or I'm interested in a job at, your company. Have you got 15 minutes free for a chat? Yeah,
it could be that. You could say something like, I noticed you're hiring for XYZ role. I think it might be a fit, but before I apply, I just want to make sure it is. So I have, I would like to chat with you for 15 minutes to ask you a few specific questions about your experience there. That could be a good way to go. Or you can just email some. If you can't get in touch with a marketing manager at the company you want to apply for, you can just talk to marketing managers in general and ask them the same question. Like you can send them an email that says, hey, I'm thinking about transitioning into a marketing manager role. Do you have 15 minutes to chat? I would love to ask you a few specific questions about your experience at XYZ company.
And it's always such a powerful thing when you can go to a company and say, well, I've spoken to, when they ask you why you want to work there, you can say, well, I've spoken to this person and that person and that person about what it's like, and, they've given me such a great insight. Just shows that you've gone the extra yard and, you've put the effort into to finding out about the company.
Yeah.
When you approach people, would you recommend going for senior people, or is it more junior people who are doing the exact job that you might be applying for?
Either one works. I find that junior people are generally more easy to get in touch with, and usually they can give you the same sort of level of information. The one benefit of of talking to someone who's higher up is that if you ask them for a referral, like several weeks later, their referral has much bigger weight because they have more expertise. So either one works.
Excellent. So we've picked our companies, we've spoken to a lot of people who are currently doing the job, and it really sounds like it's what we want to do. Step 3, you talk about doing a pre-interview project per company. Could you explain to us what a pre-interview project is?
Yeah, so it's essentially a way for you to show that you can do the job before you actually get that job. So as an example, if you're applying for like a UX design gig, that might be like actually designing a new feature for the product ahead of time and sending that in. If you're applying for a sales gig, that might be like going out and selling the product to like a few of your friends before you actually get the interview in the first place. If you're applying to like a data science gig where you can't analyze something, it might be as simple as coming up with a few specific ideas of how you could help once you get that gig. It could be like a 90-day plan of what you would do in your first 30, 60, 90 days on that job. So basically it's just any way that you can be proactive and kind of go above and beyond to prove that you can do what they're asking you to do.
I love it. And when I spoke with Prash Majmuda, the CEO of the CTO of a data science company over here in London, and he said exactly the same thing. He said, don't send me a CV, just send me a link to a project on GitHub where you've done some data mining. Show me what you can do as opposed to telling me what you can do.
Yeah.
So Raghav, how did you use pre-interview projects personally for some of the internships and jobs that you've got?
Yeah, so I use it a lot. My personal background is in both design and marketing, so I actually used it to get jobs created for me at a company called Shutterstock in New York City. So I actually I did this pre-interview project where I ran like a usability test in the UX world. That means like basically testing out how random people use the Shutterstock product, and based off of that, I redesigned part of their product, and I sent it into one of the interviewers. And based off of that, they actually created like a specific position for me within their company. I did the same thing for Airbnb. There's a bunch of other companies. Mind Valley, the company I'm working for right now. I got a marketing gig from the pre-interview project, and there's a bunch of people who read my posts from fields like marketing, design, tech, engineering, finance, like basically every field under the sun. Who've done similar things.
What sort of responses did you get when you sent these in? Were people wowed by them? I mean, what did some of the hiring managers say?
Yeah, so they really appreciated it. Pretty much every single person, pretty much like 100% of the people that I sent it to were like, wow, this is great. And they usually forward me over to HR. They forward my resume over, and usually I gets an interview pretty quickly.
And how long did they take you? How much effort were you putting in for each one? Were you talking hours or days or weeks in terms of pulling them together?
Hours, I would say, probably like 3 to 4 hours. It kind of depends. But it has it might seem like a much longer time frame versus like just shotgunning resumes out, but it does have a much higher conversion rate. You probably won't convert 100%, but it probably has, you could probably convert, I'd say, 2 out of 4, 1 out of 4, which is much greater than like sending out 1,000 resumes and getting like 2 interviews.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I love the comment in the blog of doing a pre-interview project makes you stand out because the secret sauce is hard work. So most people never do it, which is very true. I mean, people don't do they always take the path of least resistance, which is, sending off as you mentioned, a CV and cover letter to a random email box and just not getting a response.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great way to set yourself apart because even if everyone knows logically that this is the right approach, they still don't want to put in the work. They're still afraid of getting rejected. They're still afraid of wasting all their time. So 99% of the people who hear this podcast or who read my blog still won't actually do it. So the 1% who do will get all the results.
On the course you've got at Land Any Job You Want, you've got hundreds of people going through the course at the moment. Could you give us a few examples of where people have done a pre-interview project that's been really impressive and has got them good results?
Yeah, there's a lot of different examples. There's some, for example, one person got a job at Citrix. They have this software called GoToMeeting. So what she basically did was put together this large slide deck of potential market opportunities for Citrix, like the market penetration opportunities in East Asia, in the UK, and things like that. So she actually put together this large slide deck and sent it over to the marketing director and got this gig straight away. There's another person who I think got an interview at Twitter. He did a product. He basically he created this new feature, this new prototype of a new feature that he wanted Twitter to have, and he coded it up. He sent it over to, I think it was the director of product management or something, and that was an offer straight away. So yeah, it's worked for a lot of people.
You mentioned that a lot of people who are listening are going to probably think, oh, that sounds great, but I'm going to do it. Because they'll probably come up with excuses for, well, that sounds good in America, but it's not going to work in the UK, or it's not going to work in my particular industry. I mean, do you find in your experience that this works across most industries? I mean, it's not going to work in medicine or law or dentistry where you actually do need qualifications, but otherwise, do you think it works in most industries?
Yeah, I mean, so the way that I think about it is not whether it's going to work or not. I actually use this as almost a vetting tool to see if the company is good enough for me. So, for example, if this pre-interview project works, if someone is impressed, if the company is impressed that you did it, then that means that they're impressed by proactiveness. That means that they're impressed by people going above and beyond. That means that they're impressed by people not doing the bare minimum to get a job. And if they're impressed by you doing those things before the hiring process, then they're going to be impressed if you do it after you get that job. And that means that they appreciate proactiveness. They're going to give you a lot more responsibility. They're going to promote you higher up and think all these different things that are kind of a reflection of how they are after you get that gig. So I always don't, if they reject me, if it doesn't work, I don't look at it as a negative. I'm okay, that's good, because I know that they're not going to appreciate it even after I get that gig.
That's a brilliant point. And one of my previous guests, Rob Bentz, we were talking about how to get a job in property, and he gave the example of, would you actually want to work at a firm where you can get the job so easily? If you send a bog standard CV and they give you the job after that, what sort of place are you going to be working at, which just takes in people without any care and attention? The job isn't going to be exactly challenging and exciting. You're not going to be doing things that are going to excite you if they'll take anyone like that.
Yeah, exactly. And one kind of underrated benefit, unexpected benefit that you get out of doing something like this is how they treat you after they get the job. So let's say you're going for a software developer gig, and one person gets a job straight from submitting their resume online, but you get the job from the same exact job by submitting a pre-interview project. Even if you're in the exact same department with the exact same job title, the perception of who you are is going to be a lot more different from the other guy. You're going to have a lot more leeway. You're going to have a lot more freedom. And I've personally experienced this in a lot of different companies.
So, Raghav, were you known as the pre-interview project guy when the companies that you've used this to get jobs at?
Well, I was kind of known as the hustler, the person who went above and beyond. So because of that, I was given more responsibility. I was given more leeway to like start my own projects and kind of do my own thing, not be burdened by micromanagers and things like that. So yeah, it does make a difference down the road.
It's always a good thing. So we've got our brilliant Preinterview project. It's gonna excite people. It's gonna work. What do we do with it then? How do we make sure that it gets seen by the right people?
So the way that I would go about it, ideally, if you talk to someone at the company before you did this, I would submit the project to them. You can say something like, "Hey, marketing manager at Acme Corp, based on what we talked about in our conversation, you mentioned your challenges were X, Y, and Z. You mentioned you're working on X, Y, and Z. I noticed that you're hiring for this specific role, and after our conversation, I thought it would be a great fit. And based off of what you said, I put together this little project based on the challenges that you had. I think the role would be a great fit. I think this would be a great way to prove the value that I can provide to the company. I hope to hear from you regarding next steps. P.S. I already applied online." So if you come at it with that angle, generally speaking, they will either forward your resume over to like the HR people. They would do an interview themselves. They would appreciate you, and that kind of gets the process going.
So you'd recommend sending it to the person who you'd be working for, as opposed to, say, the CEO or someone in HR?
Yeah, I mean, definitely not HR. I mean, the people who are in, I guess it depends, but like the people who are in HR, the recruiters, they tend to not be too receptive in my experience, because they want because their job is to basically review resumes, right? So it's much easier for them if they just send a resume. But if you send it to someone, if you're working for a startup, say, and you send it to the CEO, that might work. If you're working for a big company like Microsoft or like Amazon or some gigantic corporation, maybe the person who you talk to and already have a connection with might be better.
No, that makes sense. And would you recommend following up? So doing a multi-pronged approach, so sending them email and hitting them up on LinkedIn or Twitter, or is it just, do one and bide your time?
Yeah, I mean, I just send that on the email. If I don't get a response back in a week, I'll follow up. If I don't get a response back the next week, I'll follow up. If after 2 or 3 follow-ups, I still don't get a response, I'm like, okay, I guess that's not going to happen. And I just apply online and keep moving.
In your experience then, so would you use this as a major talking point when you then go in for the interview? And I guess you still need to do the nuts and bolts of making sure that you know about the company and know about the job and what the role entails, and interviewing well, I guess.
Yes. So I actually send this in to like every single interviewer that I ever have. So for example, if I do a pre-interview project to get me the interview, I don't assume that the interviewers already know about it. I also, like before the interview date, I would send an email to all the interviewers saying something like, "Hey, by the way, I did this project based on what I talked about with this XYZ person, this marketing manager at your company. He mentioned X, Y, and Z, and based off of that, I did this project. I sent it to him already, but I thought that I should send it to you guys as well in case you want to talk about it tomorrow during our conversation." And they usually really appreciate that, and you get to basically, and they tend to appreciate the fact that you sent that in before the interview.
No, definitely, I can imagine that. So we talked about why people might not do this. In your experience, what holds people back from doing something creative like this?
It comes down to, I think, the fear of wasting time. So the idea that, okay, I'm going to spend 3 or 4 hours on this specific project, even though I know it works, even though I've read this blog and it sounds logical, even though I know it's worked for like people in the UK and Serbia and India and the US and all these different places. What if I spend 3 hours on this and I send out an email and I don't get a response back? That's going to feel really bad. So I think that I would take, and my counter to that would be to take a long-term view. So, I mean, if you send out 1,000 resumes, if as opposed to doing this pre-interview project, instead you tweak your resume and you keep sending it out and doing these different things, that's not the right process for the long term. If you follow the right process and sort of do the job before you get it, if you prove that you can add value for the long term, you might have a few misses here and there, but in the long term, it's going to work itself out.
No, that's very true. And I love in your blog post how to figure out what you want to do. You talk about people's fears around the trying to find the perfect job and the dream job. What do you say to people who, in their mind, have a dream job that they have idolized or idealized, but it's holding them back from actually doing anything at all?
If there's one specific job that you are putting on a massive pedestal, I would say that's probably not a good thing. I mean, it's like a relationship, right? Like, I mean, if you are idolizing like one girl or one guy, it's like that's the only person I ever want. Like, what does someone else say to that? Okay, there's a lot of fish in the sea. It's the same thing with careers. There's like a lot of different companies. There's like tens of millions of jobs out there, tens of millions of businesses all over the world. They're all hiring. Tons of them are great. They're not all like, they don't all have bad bosses. Tons of those companies have great culture. So there's a lot of stuff out there, and really it takes time to like figure out by basically talking to someone who's already working there, by talking to people who are in the roles that you're in. That's like the best way to figure out specifically what you want to do.
And of course, it's not the case now where you're going to be in a job for 20 years or 30 years. People tend to move through careers at a much quicker rate, whether it's 3 or 4 years in industry or 1 or 2 years at a company. It's just about making that initial start and starting, and then learning from that and going to the next place.
Yeah, exactly.
You mentioned earlier in the interview about closing doors. You talk in one of your blog posts about don't be afraid of closing doors. Could you delve into this about what you meant with this one?
Yeah, so whenever people think about getting a new job, like the place that they're at mentally is sort of like, okay, I have all these different interests. I want to help people. I like analysis. I like thinking logically. I like the outdoors. I like this and that. And they come at it from the point of view of like, okay, so if I tie that to one specific job title, like marketing analyst, what if I want to transition to like finance later? What if like I want to transition to this different field? What if I feel like I hate this and some other field is a better fit? Would I be closing all those doors? I don't want to get too specific. And I think I'm not sure, but I think that's actually a very common thing among younger people in their 20s, early 30s. They tend to be very non-committal. What I would say to them is that there's no such thing as limiting yourself too much. Like I said, there's like tens of millions of companies, tens of millions of businesses out there. And even if you get even if you say that you are a marketing analyst for tech companies that have employees between 20 and 50 people, even if you're that specific, you will still have like millions of options. So I don't think there's any such thing as like closing too many doors.
That's a brilliant point. And you talk about one of your blog articles, if you were looking for someone who did specialize, you're a small company of 20 to 30 people and you're looking for a marketing manager, who would you go for? You go for the person who specializes in companies for 20 to 30 people, and that's all they did, or would you go for the person who does a little bit of that and, well, a little bit of marketing for startups and a little bit of marketing for big companies? You go for the specialist.
Exactly. I mean, the listener of this podcast can probably, you're in the same shoes, right? It's like if someone's listening to my pre-interview project advice, what are they thinking? They're thinking, is this going to work for me? Is this going to work for my field? Is this going to work for my industry? And whenever you apply for a job, they're thinking the same thing. They're thinking like, are you going to be a good fit for that company? Are you going to be a good fit for that specific project that they have going on? Are you going to be a good fit for that specific culture? So the more specific you can get in whatever it is that you're doing, the more you're going to look like a tailored fit for them.
Listeners, that is very wise words of advice, and I definitely recommend that you implement it. Raghav, unfortunately, time is running away with us, but before we finish, let's move to the quickfire question of our weekly staple questions. So, putting you on the spot now, what one book would you recommend that our listeners should read?
One book. So this has nothing to do with jobs, nothing careers or anything like that. I would recommend a book called Man's Search for Meaning by a guy named Viktor Frankl. So this book is about, Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist back in the Holocaust. He survived I think 4 different concentration camps in Germany. And this guy was a psychiatrist there. And he basically documented what specifically made certain people in that concentration camp survive and persevere versus other people who just gave up based on the hardships of their circumstances. So it's an absolutely unbelievable book. It basically talks about why you need to have purpose, why you need to have something to live for, why you need to basically give yourself some sort of goal and aspiration to do, because that actually makes you stick with things a lot longer. It's a crazy book. I recommend that to everybody.
I echo that. It's a brilliant book, and definitely one that you should pick up. And you said it's not directly related to jobs, but goal setting, mindset, having a drive, they all certainly help you with your job search.
Mm-hmm.
And now then, Raghav, what one website would you recommend that our listeners need to check out?
One website apart from mine, I would recommend Cal Newport's Study Hacks blog. I think it's called studyhacks.com. I think it's a website URL. He provides like super practical tips, not just for his main goal is to like teach people how to study well in college, but those basic frameworks are applicable to practically everything you do in life. So I recommend that.
Oh, brilliant. That's not one I've come across, but I will check it out, and I'll link to it in the show notes. So check out the show notes at graduatejobpodcast.com/landanyjob. And finally, Raghav, what one tip would you give our listeners that they can implement today to help on their job search?
I would recommend, I think one thing that people don't do that they really should is talking to people who are in the jobs that they're applying for. I think that a lot of the job search that people do is all heavily online based. They look at articles, they read these generic like top 10 tips, and they kind of come to this conclusion that, okay, I think I like this job at this company, I'm just going to apply for it there. I would recommend one thing that you can do today is craft out an email that says something like, hey, person at XYZ company, I noticed, I found you on LinkedIn. Based on your experience at XYZ company in the past 3 years, I think I would really love to talk to you, chat with you for 15 minutes to ask you a few specific questions about your experience at the company you're at right now. What's a good time to chat? If you literally send that email, it takes like 5 minutes. You can send that email out to someone right now on LinkedIn and have a great conversation, and you can really learn a lot.
Brilliant. And you'll be surprised at the number of people that get back to you. I mean, most people tend to be scared that no one's ever going to reply, but people like to help. Mm-hmm. So give it a go and you won't be disappointed.
Yeah.
Raghav, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the Graduate Job Podcast. Before we finish, what is the best way for people to get in touch with you and the work that you do?
So you can get in touch with me on Twitter at Raghav Haran. That's RAGHAVHARAN. My site is landanyjobyouwant.com. I actually have a specific email list, a URL for you guys at this podcast right now, landanyjobyouwant.com/graduatejob. So if you just go there, you can sign up.
Perfect. And I'll link to everything we've talked about in the show notes. Raghav, many, many thanks for appearing on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, James. Appreciate it.
There you go. Told you it was a goodie. Many thanks again to Raghav. If you enjoyed it, make sure you let him know on Twitter. His handle is at Raghav Haran. RAGHAVHARAN. Now, lots of things for us to think about in those 30 minutes, so don't be afraid to rewind and have another listen. The key takeaway for me is on the pre-interview project. Now, does it take a bit of work? Yes. Is it worth it? Definitely. You need to stand out from the crowd when you're applying for work, and this will allow you to do so. Put yourself in the recruiter's position. If you're faced with hundreds of CVs arriving all the time that all look very similar and are all quite bland, who would you rather interview? Someone who does the same and just sends a CV, or someone who's taken the initiative, put some time and effort in and crafted a decent pre-interview project, looking at the issues you're facing as a business or a new marketing strategy or tweaks to your existing product range or whatever it might be? The opportunities are endless. What's important though is that you make the effort to stand out. You know it makes sense. So have a think and think about what you can do to create that amazing pre-interview project. There you go. Lecture over for me today. Now, the one website to remember for all the links and transcripts and everything that we've talked about today is graduatejobpodcast.com/landanyjob. Now, two final requests from me. If this episode or any of the 44 other episodes have been useful to you, you can thank me in one of two ways. One is to fill the survey in at graduatejobpodcast.com/survey, and the other is to leave me a review on iTunes. Now, the boffins at Apple put a lot of weight into the number of reviews that a show gets. So if you've been finding the Graduate Job Podcast helpful, please leave me a review so more people can find out about it and we can spread the word. All that's left for me to say is join me next week when I speak to Tamara McCleary, who shares how she went from fashion blogger to social media manager. It's an inspiring episode, if I do say so myself. I hope you enjoyed the show today, but more importantly, I hope you use it and apply it. See you next week.